Welcome to IB Unplugged, a Cognity podcast for IB-DP educators that tackles your submitted questions and challenges by connecting you with experts and peers who share their ideas and stories from real classrooms. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of IB Unplugged. We have an exciting episode where I get to put John in the hot seat, where he's joining the MYP coordinator at his school, where John and Paul get to talk about the transition from MYP to DP. This is a subject the two of them have been thinking a lot about. If you're going to the global conference in The Hague this week, they're doing a pre-conference session on that. And so this is really a topic that we felt like there are a lot of teachers that have challenges and a lot of coordinators that are really working on this transition, getting it to be smooth. So yeah, this is an exciting conversation today.
Yeah, so this is pretty exciting for me, actually, because I get to switch seats and be kind of more in the interview, I guess, or interviewee position, and talk a little bit more about the transition from the MYP to the DP. And of course, getting to work with my colleague, Paul Rondie, is pretty amazing. I've gotten to work with him for the last few years, and I'd say we work relatively well as coordinators, but, Paul isn't just an MYP coordinator. He's done a whole lot with the IB, both in DP and MYP. From a DP side, he's a maths analysis and approaches teacher, but he's also the principal moderator for that course. He's written one of the textbooks on maths analysis and approaches. He's also done a lot with the Association of Central European IB Schools, coordinating with middle years teachers and MYP coordinators there as well. So he just brings tons of experience, and it's fun getting to work with him just because he kind of challenges me anyway, and I think I challenge him as well, but we're both open-minded to the whole process. And so we're excited to, one, I guess, present this at the global conference and do a workshop around this, but two, just getting to talk about it right now. So we really appreciate the opportunity to kind of take an episode here of IB Unplugged and talk about that transition from the MYP into the DP.
Yeah, so again, hopefully you have a lot of questions and thoughts around this transition period. And as John said, he'll be at the global conference. I'll also be there. John and I are hosting our first live IB Unplugged session as well. We're joining with the IBO's Matt Glanville to talk about AI and digital assessments. So if you're going to be there, please come say hi to us. We'll be either at the Cognity booth at our session or just around. So hope to see you there if you're joining. But in the meantime, let's get on to transitions from MY to DP.
Hi, Paul. Welcome to IB Unplugged. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, John.
Yeah, obviously, it's kind of funny because we work together, of course. Paul is our MYP coordinator at St. Gilgen International School, and I'm the DP coordinator here. And so we thought we'd talk about the transition a little bit and how we facilitate that MYP to DP transition. And Paul, of course, just wanted to show off his green headphones. So that's kind of the key thing we got going on there, right? They're top notch.
Lucky I've got them because they actually belong to my son. They're his gaming headphones.
I'm sure there's nobody that can empathize with that, right? Look, before we dive in, and obviously, we've worked together, but I got to say, I don't know if I know this answer as well as I probably should, given that we've worked together for so long. But let's kind of get things kicked off and help people get to know you. Why education? Why did you get into education in the first place, Paul?
Well, it wasn't really education. I got into maths. It was really the thing. I'm a maths teacher. Yeah, a maths geek, really. Love maths. I kind of love the wow moment that comes when when you're doing mathematics. And I guess I wanted other people to have the wow moment.
I think I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, it's elusive, but it's true though. I mean, I have kids in my high level classes that I got to wait for that. I'm teaching them something that I know where we're going, and I'm just waiting for that moment. And I really enjoy that side of it. So I think it was maths rather than education, just being able to give that wow moment to people.
And then how did you get into the kind of IB space within there?
I guess there's a lot of wow moments in HL mathematics. I guess that's part of it. The IB was it's the schools that I was at. I kind of really fell for the program very early on in my career, and tried to move to schools which I felt would do the IB program well. I started mainly in the diploma program, to be honest. It was where I was a teacher, and then I was a diploma coordinator. So that's been my, that was my initial part. And then when I came to St. Gilgen's International School, it was my chance to sort of get into the middle years program, which I hadn't really experienced before.
Now, Paul, we get to work together, and I know that you wear multiple hats. Obviously, you just spoke about maths, and I know, in the introduction we talked about how you are principal examiner for the maths analysis and approaches course. You're part of the curriculum review team, so you do all sorts of things there, as well as IB, MYP coordination. So I guess thinking about all those parts, all those different hats that you wear, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
I don't tell my head, but it's still the maths. To be honest, I still love that side of things, and it's where I enjoy being in the classroom. But I've kind of adapted that to doing, as you said, with the curriculum review work, with the diploma program, and so on, and getting more involved in curriculum as I've gone through my career. I guess that I'm starting to really enjoy those sort of kind of bigger conversations, I guess, the ones which are a little bit more big idea, looking from the balcony type of things. I've started to enjoy those a little bit more as well.
As you literally do from your office, which has a balcony that oversees what's going on at the school.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's dive in here. I'm really excited to hear about the way that you two work together. So as we kind of go through this conversation, I would, love to hear kind of both angles here of this transition that we've heard from Cognity all of the time, this kind of awkward space in between two fantastic curriculum that have been built with this continuum in mind, but there's still growing and transition pains that I think happen there. So I think maybe before we do this, actually, Paul, since you sit in both camps, you are teaching DP, you're coordinating MYP. From your opinion, where do you think some of the biggest work has to be put in for the two of you as the two coordinators to really make this transition feel comfortable for students?
Well, I think we've talked about this a lot, John, haven't we? The idea of the narrative that moves from the MYP into the diploma program, as you highlighted there yourself, Courtney. There's this perceived chasm between the two. The diploma program is difficult, and it's and stressful, and all of those sort of words which are very negative sounding, and the MYP is
clouds and rainbows, and
exactly, unicorns
surrounding them in cotton wool.
It's more playful, particularly in a school like our own, where we don't do the e-assessment, so we don't have those sort of terminal examinations at the end of grade 10. We're relatively free, and I think that's it's trying to get the narrative right for us as teachers, for us as MYP coordinators, for us as students or parents. That whole narrative, I think, is the thing that is really important, and it's something that we've really kind of tried to get our mind on. John talks a lot about cognitive shifts, maybe John, you tell me about those.
Yeah. I mean, just that idea of going from what power comes with the language we choose to use when we talk about the programs. I mean, just as Paul mentioned, if we continually talk about one program as so stressful, or you're never going to get any sleep, or it's, all that stuff, that really brings down a negative connotation with the program itself. And so, little changes like when students want to say, I'm so stressed, let's just change that to, I need a plan. It's kind of the same thing, but it puts more action, and it puts more like, I'm in charge of this, as opposed to this is happening to me. And that's another one. This is happening to me becomes this is happening for me. And just those small changes actually, I think, make a big difference with the way that our students might view the programs. And then there's a lot of work just with regard to, that perception. What are each of these programs? And I know both Paul and I will do lots of presentations, whether they're to students or if they're to parents or our colleagues. And we're always coming back to what's in common. And it's the IB learner profile. It's our approaches to teaching. It's our approaches to learning, and really centering on the philosophy and just making sure we know, why are we educating in the first place? And let's start there. It's not about doing exams. It's not about getting great scores, that sort of thing. That can be there. But the key thing is, hey, we want to try to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, caring young people, that sort of thing. And so we really try to focus on that, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the parents, as you said, we do presentations to parents, and they nod along dutifully to that sort of message. We want our students to be caring, and we want them to be.
It's a hard one to debate.
Yeah, take any one of those. But then there's always this comes back to this. Well, what about the grades? And trying to kind of balance those two things, I think, is really key.
And I mean, the expectations in MYP and DP are super different, of course. And you were saying you guys don't do the e-assessments, but when you're setting up the expectations in each program, how do they differ? And is there a way that you ease into and evolve the MYP expectations? Or is it that you start off a bit, maybe this is still the wrong word, but like softer for DP1s and then ramp up the program?
I'm going to go with like no, yes, and we're trying. I mean, I think that we're trying to get it right. Basically, it's something that we've worked on a lot in the last couple of years, John and I, just to try and sort that sort of narrative out, and to move that perception away from the playfulness of MYP into the seriousness and the stressfulness of diploma program. And so there's different little different things that we've tried to implement along the way, and I'm sure we'll get into those. But it's not a sort of an instant change, and it's been gradual. So there's things that we've tried, there's things that we still want to try, but we've got to make room for them to happen. And it's not just me and John sitting in a room deciding all of this stuff as well, because we've got to bring the staff along with us, and we've got to remember that there are students sitting on seats, and we've got to get people into the school, and I've got a head and a board and all of those sort of things. So there's a lot of kind of parts of the equation. So
I think it's really fair, to talk about just the context that we're working within and trying to make sure that things line up there, and also just as you mentioned, Paul, like we're not standing here or I guess talking here as though like, hey, we've got it all right, come and listen to us, but rather understand the challenge and the complexities that I think exist in that framing of the MYP to the DP, keeping the expectations the same. And I know, Paul and I, as you mentioned, we work quite a bit together on just trying to develop in these nuances. Where are the little wins? Where are the small things that we can work on? And I know one of the key things that you always mention, Paul, is, I want to keep the authenticity of the MYP. I want to keep the right philosophy of this and make sure that we're still focusing on inquiry-based learning. We want to focus on this sort of that lead that the MYP is all about. And I want to keep the authenticity there without just becoming, let's train so we can have some great DP exams, right? And so I think both of us, when we come to this, it's like, how do we see those two expectations still being there? Like, let's make sure we have the authenticity of the MYP program. But at the same time, I'm going, well, we need to ramp up some rigor, and we need to be sure they're ready, because that first step into the DP for some students can be quite challenging. It's a big step. And so how can we minimize that step while still maintaining the authenticity of the MYP? And I think that's a question that guides a lot of our work. Becoming a better IBDP educator is a daily practice informed through reading, research, personal experience, and episodes from IB Unplugged, like the one you are listening to right now. But sometimes the show can go a bit too quickly, or we can simply forget some of the key points once we are out of the car or back from our walk and in the office preparing for our next lesson. That's why it's easy to download the episode summary at cognity.com/IB Unplugged. Simply navigate to today's episode and click Free Summary to receive a condensed summary of today's episode, including links to other sources and other exciting bits of information you can use immediately in your daily practice. It's free and it helps. Now, back to the show.
What do you think are some of those non-negotiables of the MYP that you won't concede to with with DP prep or kind of pre-DP?
Well, I mean, I believe in the program, and to be honest, that those sort of things are there. They're laid out already. As John talks about the approaches to teaching and the approaches to learning, the idea of concept-based teaching, the inquiry-based learning. I mean, those are absolutely key to the MYP program, and we have to believe that those are beneficial to a DP student as well, that inquiry approach, even when, really at the end of the day, they're sitting down and they're answering these tough exams at the end. Yeah, so I think the inquiry base is something that we concentrated on as a school. And then the introducing the rigor into the MYP program as well. And I think there's always been this kind of like, conflict between inquiry-based, the open-ended investigations, and rigor, and I think that's the non-negotiable to me is inquiry, and the ability to be able to build in rigor either into the inquiry or in it separately from that is the aim as well.
And then John, from your side, what do you think is maybe one of the biggest hurdles to overcome that you feel like maybe the students don't feel as prepared in this kind of way for the DP that you have to work the hardest at?
I mean, a lot of it seems to shift. And actually, Paul does these, he's a mathematician. He likes diagrams and that sort of stuff. And then we put a mental model to this. And I remember it was just a couple of weeks ago, put together this model of like, okay, here are the main criteria that we're covering in the MYP. And, across each of the disciplines, there's effectively 4 main criteria. And then it was like, all of these 3, so in the maths example, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, criterion B, C, and D are kind of more skills, concepts, inquiry, that sort of approach.
Yeah, communication, pattern spotting, and real life applications. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And then, criterion A was more like the knowledge and understanding bit. And then it seemed like that sort of funnels into being kind of the main thing when you show up in the DP is like, I've got to acquire a lot of knowledge. And so we noticed that was one of the bigger things when it comes to the DP is just students recognizing like what was effectively almost 25% of their curriculum, I guess, in MYP suddenly becomes a much bigger part of the DP. And so it's those skills of like, how do I learn? How do I acquire lots of knowledge quickly? What is my independent study looking like? What are my homework strategies and my skills? How am I actually acquiring this knowledge? And that we found, I think, was one of the bigger gaps is just students recognizing like, there is a big amount of work I got to do, and I'm not sure I have the skills for it. And so we needed to really reevaluate, like, where are we intentionally structuring how to learn, how to use your independent study time, how to get feedback. Why is that feedback useful? And so I think from the DP side, it's just that big jump in learning all the stuff right away. And then I guess, just following on from that, as we kind of hold our coordinator's hat here and we want to try to frame that narrative. Now, both of us get to teach as well, but we have to essentially communicate that from coordinators all the way to our teachers as well and make sure that they are aware of those expectations and that the same message is going through, because we know that sometimes students might get the wrong message. They hear from this teacher, oh, this is what that's going to look like. They hear from another teacher, this is what it's going to look like instead. And so part of our role, I guess, is to really communicate that effectively and make sure that our teachers are getting the same message across as well. And I know, like, I could talk a little bit from the DP side, but Paul, from your side, how do you kind of approach that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, the types of, when we're employing teachers year on year, we're taking teachers, then some have no MYP or DP experience. A lot have DP experience, and very few actually have MYP experience, just because of the nature of the size of those subjects. So people who are coming into the school with diploma program experiences, and perhaps coming from schools that have perhaps done things like international GCSEs in their middle years, have a very different perception of what that kind of looks like, what the middle years should look like, and what the diploma program, the type of students who are arriving in the diploma program are going to be like. The other side of that is that a lot of people have. Not a lot of people, have this kind of MYP experience, and it's a very, very steep learning curve to get to understanding all of that, all the assessments and the objectives behind each of the subjects, and the way that this is this is assessed, and the rubrics that are used, and so on. That's a steep learning curve there. So that conversation is really important, and we kind of try to kind of develop good MYP teachers early on in their tenure at the school. It's a tough gig, definitely.
Last question on this kind of framing of the narrative in the school and with the teachers and students. From the outside, I'm wondering, it's one of those things where when you talk about a transition, it could also make it even worse. Like, it could be the more that you talk with a student, the more you talk about it being a transition rather than it happening organically, it could also create an even scarier narrative of like, now there's the big jump between, I mean, if you're thinking, I come from the US, like going to high school from middle school, there's this physical change of school that feels like a scarier transition than like 9th grade to 10th grade where it just happens. And I'm wondering how you guys balance that of it's important to recognize what's changing and what's happening, but also we don't want to make this into an even scarier situation.
You're telling me I shouldn't just start my first session with them and go, right, no more fun, sit down, learn stuff. This is it.
Well, I tell them they're not going to have any fun when they get to you, so it's fair enough, right? So.
Perfect. So it sounds really healthy.
No, it's there is. You're right. There is an inevitability of this move. You know, it's part of growing up in a sense. You know, you have to acknowledge we have to acknowledge the change. There is a change, and we're not going to deny one exists. And so. But there does we change the homework expectations, for example, moving from MYP to diploma program. There are changes like that, just as there are when they move from grade 8 into grade 9. There's an acknowledgement of the different position that students are in. So yeah, I think the first part, the answer to that is just acknowledging that it exists. Is part of it, but then easing the transition is, I guess, what we're really talking about.
Well, and I think some of the kids are actually quite excited about it too. They get excited about the idea of like, okay, now it's the DP, and now I'm ready to take that next step, get a little bit more serious, narrow my choices, think about university and that sort of thing. So I think there's an element to which they're excited about it, but you're absolutely right. If we over-exacerbate it, if we make it too big of a thing, then yeah, it has that negative consequence, right? That negative side effect of kids being like, well, wait a second, am I actually prepared or not? And I think just even reflecting as you ask the question now, ultimately, we've had conversations with our parents at our school here who are asking exactly those questions, and probably because we do have such to a certain extent, a difference between the two. And so they're constantly saying, well, is this actually preparing our students for the DP? Are they actually ready? How do we know? And was this enough rigor to get them ready for the classes and that sort of thing? So, actually, that's a great question. And maybe we need to think that one through a bit more here, Paul. Maybe we're making too big of a deal out of it, and that's what's causing the big step.
Yeah, but it's brought upon us as well, because you mentioned there, parents, a big stakeholder in all of this. They want to know, right? They want to know what are you doing? What are you doing in the MYP that's helping my student when they get to the DP? And if they perceive that it's not very much, then they're going to be concerned about that. But it is an interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, then let's reassure some of those fears, and kind of the next part dive into some of those MYP skills and concepts that are actually really preparing students for the DP classrooms. And I think especially in the subjects that have seen new syllabus changes, we do see even more continuity there. But could you talk about some of those skills that you really believe that the MYP is helping with the DP classrooms?
Yeah, I think I can. It's falling back upon those sort of learner profile and approaches to learning again, because I genuinely do feel that we can teach MYP students to be resilient, and we can teach them to be self-managers, and we can teach them to be able to research well and reference well and have academic integrity and all of those things that absolutely make a good diploma program student. They have to develop those skills within the MYP or whichever program they're arriving from. And so having something like the personal project in grade 10, where a student is learning how to do an extended piece of work and to have to be able to research for that, to appreciate which approaches to learning are going to be useful in developing their product and learning their learning goal. Those are where those skills are developed, and so we have to kind of acknowledge that we do some of this stuff already, and these independent, resilient, self-aware, research-able students are leaving the MYP. Are you receiving them, John? Are you getting these kids?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you do a great job, especially as you're guiding the personal project, of signposting that stuff and just being like, hey, this is where you're going to develop something that you are going to use in the diploma program. You develop some research skills that you're going to use here. And I think this also kind of pulls back to our first segment around like how we're framing that narrative and how we're talking about it with teachers as well, and making sure that our teachers are signposting that too, and just being like, this research skill, this ability to reference, this self-management skill that you're picking up now, you're going to see that in the DP. And so then I also think from a DP side, we've got to call back to it and just say, yeah, remember when you developed this thing while you're working through the personal project, or when you did your collaboration type work, this is the skill and how it works here. So it's that very intentional, I think, calling out and sort of pulling from either program just to help the students recognize there's continuity and there's intention behind what we're doing in the MYP to help them be ready for the DP. Because I think too often students might disconnect one course from the next, or even 1 year from the next. So they like, well, I just learned those skills in science for grade 8, but now it's a completely different science in grade 9. It's like, no, we're spiraling this. We're bringing all this stuff up. You're going to hit that again and again. And I think when you call that out for the student to recognize, then they have a better chance of actually doing it in the diploma program as well. And then those skills that they develop in the MYP serve them really well in the DP as well.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the other side of that is the other side away from those skills is the content. Obviously, that's one of the things I think that we're kind of in the middle of doing in the last couple of years as a school. We started to really take a look at our curriculum, the one that's taught in the MYP, and to look at the sort of subject specific content that we're giving to the students, and looking ahead and thinking of ourselves with our diploma program hats on, and looking back and saying, okay, so where is this? Where are the gaps? What's the stuff that I'm not teaching in the middle years program that would be useful for the diploma program? And so it's been a big piece of work. I mean, the putting these curriculum maps together, and we're still in the sort of like, we've got them, and now we're on our sort of gap analysis stage and thinking ahead and thinking, okay, so what are we not doing? You know, when we look at our DP results, or when I look at my DP students, what is it that are missing? What is it that they're missing? And that kind of content gap analysis is where we're at, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So is that an exercise that's being done DP and MYP together then? And a bit of like backwards design from where you need to be at the DP and then filling it in? Because I guess you can choose the content in MYP. And is that now the way that you are really choosing the content? Yeah,
exactly that. And you know, we have, there are advantages and disadvantages of being a small school, but one of the big advantages is that a lot of teachers do kind of fall into those two camps of diploma program and middle years. And so it's not difficult to put yourself in the position of a diploma program teacher when you're a diploma program teacher, and just think, okay, so what is it that I want? But yeah, it's been a whole school approach. It's been throughout, even from our primary years to through the middle years, just thinking about the entire progression, and just trying to kind of join that up a little bit more. You know, we do. I'm not saying that the International Baccalaureate don't kind of help. They do. They have thought about that as well, clearly. But we've got to put that into our own context, and the subjects that we have, and the teachers we have, and when students arrive in our school, when they predominantly arrive. That's all of those sort of things have to be thrown into that mix where we're thinking about this student who's moving. One student's moving from grade 5 up into grade 12, and another one's going from grade 10 into grade 12, and we've got to kind of keep that in mind.
Okay, my name is Joe Williams. I'm the IB Diploma Program Coordinator at Rickards High School in Tallahassee, Florida. And I will say that my teachers, especially my math and science teachers, love Cognity. It has really transformed the way they're able to teach, to have the interactive online text, and I use text broadly to help facilitate their teaching process, and it allows the kids to interact with the material at home, not just in the classroom, so it makes learning a 24-hour process.
it's one of those things where, yeah, I think as Paul alluded to, the IB has sort of planned this out, but I would highly recommend it for any coordinators out there listening right now. It's such a useful exercise to do, and I would say year in and year out. We've done it really in earnest this last year, I would say. Paul and I really took a deep look at how we've been doing and what we want to improve on, and are we actually achieving the things we want, and where do we have control over that, and how can we shift things around? And even just going back through that as almost an exercise together, even if it was just a thought exercise, it helps so much in understanding the context, helping to frame it a little bit better for our students. And yeah, part of that also comes down to them motivating students as well, because one of the bigger things when it comes to, and I know we'll talk about it soon, but that transition process, how you like the mechanics, I guess, or the actual process of going from pre-IB diploma program into diploma program, a lot of it comes down to students understanding, like, am I good at this, and do I like it, and am I going to need it later on? And so they need a curriculum, they need some content that's in the MYP that helps them know, like, oh, I am actually pretty good at maths analysis type thinking, or I am actually pretty good at politics, and that's kind of a direction I want to go. So we really had to think carefully about what are we actually putting in the content in MYP to, again, stay authentic to the MYP, but at the same time prepare students well enough so that they were making informed decisions when it came to selecting what they wanted to do for the diploma program. Yeah,
and I think that the signposting side of things there is a really important part of it. The idea of, that we're in a classroom, and as a maths teacher, I'm teaching a particular topic, and I'm able to say, this is analysis. This is the type of thing you would do if you chose the analysis course. This is preparation for that. If you liked this, then bank that and remember when you come to your decisions that this is the type of thing that you enjoyed. And I think that that happens across the school in all subjects. Or it's improving. That's the sort of focus that we're having, being able to help students to make that decision, the best decision they can make.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of reflection in the diploma program. So I guess you're starting them young and getting them ready to always be reflecting in the MYP as well.
Yeah,
that's exactly, it. Yeah. ABR, always be reflecting. That's what we say. And they love it. They love it. They can't get enough of it, actually. Every time they get the chance to reflect, they celebrate.
It has become a bit of a dirty word sometimes, right? But that's it's a dirty word, but it's important.
They go dancing through the courtyard. Guess what I did today? I got to reflect again.
We made a decision this year as well, which about, I don't know, when was it? About 4 years ago, we had grade 10 examinations at the end of the MYP, and we removed them, and for the last few years we haven't had them, and we were relying, as John alluded to previously, on these sort of criteria A style assessments as being the way of understanding whether you kind of really had the knowledge and understanding required to be in the diploma program. But we've quickly realised, and it's not a massive revelation. I mean, I think it's kind of obvious in a way, but the idea of doing a grade 10 examination is more than just content, but it is a lot to do with content. But it's about being able to recall that and mimic what's going to be happen when they get to the diploma program, of course. And so we had to have a conversation with our students, have a conversation with the parents, have a conversation with teachers about reintroducing the diploma program, the grade 10 exams to prepare people for the diploma program. We had a little bit of a think around e-assessments as well, and whether that was the right way to go, or scrap it all and do IGCSEs. But I think that I do genuinely believe in the middle years program, and I like what we're able to do. And I'm happy to introduce a little bit of rigor and put in some grade 10 exams as well, just to ease that transition. John didn't make me do it.
I couldn't make you do anything, Paul.
Any other, I don't know where to go with that. Any other thoughts on any of the kind of like MYP skills and concepts in the TP classroom before we kind of move on to diving into that actual transition process?
I think that's really quite useful is this focus on conceptual learning. And I know we've been talking about this a lot as we talk about all the different curricula and the curriculum review, and even in our conversation with regard to like how the IB curriculum is put together. so much is now being focused on conceptual understanding and understanding how knowledge you gain in this area can apply to all these others. And so you're just seeing so much more of that in the diploma program with each new iteration of a different syllabus. And so I guess in that regard, I'm really thankful that in the MYP, there's such a big focus on it. And so it's again that let's pull this and make sure that our DP students are aware that skill you've developed there is pertinent and it's absolutely useful here. And the way that the IB is going to assess your knowledge, maybe a third of it's going to be how well you can recall the information. Beyond that, it's how well can you apply it and how can you think of it in different concepts and different contexts as well. So understanding this overarching concept that now applies all the way around it. And I think that ultimately gets to what the IB is aiming for with their theory of knowledge approach and the main mission itself. It's you got to be a deep thinker, somebody who thinks very critically about all this stuff. And I think the conceptual approach is a great way to achieve that. So just a very brief moment on that with regard to when we develop that skill in the MYP, it's definitely necessary in the DP as well.
All right, let's dive into our last part here, the transition process. I think that this is probably something that looks really different in every school. I mean, every continuum school, every school that maybe just does the two, the MYP and the DP. Some, like you said, are doing IGCSEs instead. But at least at your school and in your experience, can you talk a bit about the entry criteria and the actual who's going into the DP? How do you decide who's going into the DP?
Yeah, I mean, we've constantly spoken about the entry criteria and what we are expecting from students as they come in. I guess in general, what we do now is we have like an application process. Students apply to the IB Diploma program as opposed to just being old enough to get in. And they write a letter of motivation, and then they include their subject selections. They need to get a reference from their mentor tutor as well that says, yeah, they're ready, they're showing these particular skills. And then that's all wrapped up with their reports and how they've done so far. So it's a good evaluation of how are they as a learner. And then we have an interview as well. So I interview the students and talk with them about what they want from the diploma program and what subjects they're taking, how that aligns with their long-term goals. So we try to mimic what applying to university is going to be like when they apply to the IB Diploma program and just kind of get them used to that process. Not just for the preparation for university, but also to understand the student as a learner. Paul mentioned it earlier. We've got some students who have been with us since grade 5, and then we've got some students who join us just in grade 10, right before they're actually picking their subjects. So you really want to try to understand the learner, and I think that goes beyond what they might be able to show in a test score here, there, or other way, or anywhere else. Now, the grade 10 exams that Paul was just talking about, those can be useful. They help to inform like, hey, maybe actually not higher level biology. Maybe let's do something else. Some of those can help by seeing the results that they do. But we don't have like the strict, you have to earn this number in order to be accepted into the program. We really try to understand the student as a learner. And that ultimately comes down to their approach to learning skills and how are they developing that IB learner profile and that IB approach to learning. And I think that you could argue that. You could definitely argue it and say, well, then they're not ready. They don't have the content knowledge. You got to have like minimum criteria to be able to enter a specific course. But for us, I don't think we want to throw we don't want to close the doors in front of our students right away. We want to understand what's motivating them. Why are they thinking this thing? And what evidence are they drawing upon to make a good subject selection? And then, have they done all the things they need to do to be prepared to move into that next step? And that's an interview, and that's talking about it in their paper and in their personal statement, if you will, their essay to apply. So those things I think help to navigate it a little bit.
I think the other important aspect to it is that we appreciate, and I don't think there's any school in the country that's in the world that's going to be able to say, all of our students are going to go into the diploma program because we've prepared them so well. They're all going to get 45 points, and that's that's every single student. So it's that kind of understanding of the student which is key, and realizing and helping them to understand their pathway that they've got, and offering them options within those different pathways. Not every student is destined to be a diploma program student. There are other pathways that might be useful to them to go through, and it's a really, really important conversation that starts within the MYP that you have to be gentle with, particularly when egos are concerned and parents are concerned, and it's a not easy conversations. And fortunately, John has those more than I have. But it's an important part of that is that kind of realizing of expectations when you do get to the diploma program. But that's part of the narrative that we started with, right? It's part of what, that whole of thinking of things as being opportunities rather than obstacles, and all of those other narrative parts that we've talked about.
Makes sense. I think another part of the what will make you successful in the DP, a huge component of it is, like you were talking about earlier, the subject selection, and really making sure that the students are in the subjects that either they're really interested in, they've shown that they've excelled in the MYP, maybe not. How much do you guide the subject choice to kind of help them get kicked off on the right foot in DP?
We do a lot of introduction to the subjects as well. So we talk about the IB Diploma program. We introduce that, I guess, in more December time or so. And then we've got a whole about 5-6 weeks where subject, like heads of department, can be talking about the subjects that are on offer in their particular departments. They really clarify what those subjects are. But I think so much of this also really comes back to, again, signposting in the classes that they're in the MYP. So even though they might be taking, an individuals and societies course, and it's not specified as this is economics, history, global politics, or psychology, or whatever, but instead, during that course, they're constantly thinking about, hey, this style of teaching and learning that we're going through right now, this lends itself to more economics type of thinking, or this lends itself more to psychology, or whatever it might be. And I guess that lends itself really well to the feedback that we use as well. So how are we communicating to a student that they are understanding the concepts, that they're understanding the content itself? And is that feedback helpful? Is it useful, kind, that sort of thing, as well as identifying gaps and what they need to improve on? Because ultimately that feedback is, I think, what motivates a lot of students. They'll come and they'll talk with me about their subject selections, and sometimes they're not totally sure, but they'll say, well, I'm good at this subject, so I guess I'm going to go on to it. And that can be a really good indicator that they should do it. But again, it makes us have to come back to, was that feedback that you were given accurate? Was it honest, reliable, that sort of thing too? And making sure that the students have heard the right things from their MYP teachers about that subject, so that when they go on to select it in the diploma program, they are ready and they do have the right set of feedback to let them know they'll be successful or not.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a really key point there, and it's in my mind, it's that difference between constructive and helpful feedback and a grade in the MYP. It could be argued it's easier to reach the higher echelons of the grades in the MYP because of the way that formative assessment is giving us the tools that we need for this one summative assessment, which is going to give me a grade. And you do end up with students who perhaps are getting a good MYP grade, who then might have an unrealistic idea about how that particular grade transfers to a diploma program grade. So, for example, a student coming out with a level 6, a grade 6 in the MYP maths, doesn't mean that they're a DP level 6 student. It means that they have developed these particular skills in the MYP program. That's a tough conversation to have. It's a tough thing for students to understand, because it should directly translate, and perhaps it's mea culpa on this one, but it isn't directly translating, and so that is part of the conversations that need to be had with the MYP students. Great.
Well, then I want to wrap up in this last piece. When I think about some of the things, the takeaways from this conversation that I really like this idea of the curriculum mapping and the backwards design of DP to MYP, because you do have so much flexibility in the content there. I like that you're really spending a lot of active time on framing the narrative for students, parents, also for the teachers, making sure that MYP teachers feel like they're in a good place to not be throwing the kids in the deep end with DP. You've talked a lot about the concept-based approaches and skills that you can build in the MYP that help in DP. And I'm just wondering if there's any other pieces of advice or kind of really tangible actions that you feel like your school has been doing really well to help make this transition as seamless as it possibly could be?
It helps if the MYP program coordinator and the DP program coordinator get on okay, and genuinely it's useful. We have a lot of conversations. We share a common philosophy, and that's developed over the years, and I think it's a really important part of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to have a good working relationship between the coordinators, and I guess just an openness to learn, openness to, we don't have that necessarily right. Let's see, what else can we work on? And I think modeling the IB learner profile of that sort of, let's be open-minded about it. I would just add to that little bit, have a good relationship with your coordinators, and then be open-minded. We got more stuff we can always work on. Great.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. Thanks, John, for kind of switching hats here and answering a lot more questions than usual.
I got to be in the hot seat a little bit. This was fun.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. That's great.
IB Unplugged is a Cognity podcast hosted by John Patton and Courtney Marlene and produced by Catalina Gaffney. Be sure to subscribe or follow and share with your fellow IB educators. If you'd like to submit a topic, request, or question, please do so on cognity.com/IB Unplugged. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other in teaching with confidence, creativity, and joy. See you next time.